Good morning. I am Graham Durant, and I have the privilege of being director of Questacon, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here today. I would particularly like to acknowledge United States Ambassador Berry and thank you for your initiative in pulling this event together. And I'd also like to particularly welcome Australia's Chief Scientist, Professor Ian Chubb, and of course the students and teachers from Gungahlin, Narrabundah, Hawker and Dixon. Welcome. Distinguished guests, I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today. I wish to acknowledge Ngunnawal elders, past and present, and those Indigenous Australians and Torres Strait Islanders here in the audience. I wish to recognise Indigenous Australians as the first technologists and innovators on this land. Australia has a proud achievement of history of innovation and can lay claim to many world-changing inventions and innovations. And many of our greatest innovations and inventions began as a spark of inspiration, the seed of an idea or a problem to be solved. And the people behind these inventions and innovations had the perseverance and drive to take their ideas on what was often a long and winding road to see them developed into successful products or solutions. And all of these innovations required brains and hands working together, brains and hands and teamwork, knowledge and skill. Knowledge, skill, know-how and partnerships. Know-how, skill and partnerships, and of course perseverance. Don't give up. Today the focus is on innovation and partnership and the close relationship between Australia and the United States. Questacon, as Australia's National Science and Technology Centre, is very proud of our close relationship with science centres and other organisations in the United States. We work very closely with the Exploratorium in San Francisco that was the inspiration for Questacon, so that 25 years ago this building opened, largely because of the visit of one physics educator to the Exploratorium, and the founder of Questacon realised that this was something that we had to have in Australia. We're particularly pleased that our work is supported by some US companies, including Raytheon, the sponsor of our Schmidt Digital Studio, and that's named in the honour of the United States-born Nobel Prize winner Brian Schmidt. And Brian gives his apologies, he's unable to join us today, but his medal is on display in the foyer, and we're very, very pleased to have Brian as one of our advisory council members. From the Schmidt Studio, we've been able to connect Australian students, for example, with the NASA Neutral Buoyancy Lab in Houston, their astronaut training facility, for a Neutral Buoyancy Design Challenge. We've connected schools and emergency service volunteers in the US and Australia to share experiences about recent natural disasters. And from this theatre, we've been able to link NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden to students across Australia when he's been in Canberra. So it's my pleasure now to welcome US Embassy Economic Councillor Matt Murray to get things moving. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Matt Murray, and I'm the US Embassy Economic Councillor, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the first Ambassadors Innovation Roundtable. And I'd like to especially extend a warm thanks to Graham Durant, Craig Whalen, Michelle Canning, and the entire staff here at Questacon, which has provided this terrific venue for this morning. I'd also like to thank many of our other partners that have played key roles arranging this event, including the Australian Department of Industry, who has many representatives here, and I'm particularly grateful to Joe Higgins, the American Chamber of Commerce in Sydney, and many of its member companies, and I'd like to particularly recognize AmCham CEO Niels Marquardt and President Maureen Dougherty, and the Australian National University and Innovate ANU, particularly Mick Cardew-Hall and Karen Jackson. And of course, I'd reiterate Graham's warm welcome to Chief Scientist Professor Ian Chubb. On a personal level, helping to organize the Ambassadors Innovation Roundtable has been very exciting and rewarding for me, as I grew up in a household with a mother who was a science teacher and was always pushing the virtues of a career in science, technology, engineering, or math. You can imagine my mother's disappointment, therefore, when I announced 20-some years ago that when I went away to university that I would be majoring in political science. To which she replied, "That's not exactly the kind of science I had in mind." It has taken 20 years, but I now understand better than ever before that it really is science and innovation that makes the world go round. And I'm definitely in awe of the tremendous brainpower and creativity sitting in this room. And I was in awe last night when I was in the ABC studios up the street and was sitting next to Callum from Dixon College, who's here with us this morning, hearing about his work on designing unmanned aerial vehicles, something I most definitely was not doing in year 11 and 12. Whether representing a government department, business, research institution, or school, all of you are the innovators of today and tomorrow. And there's so much we can all accomplish together as Americans and Australians working to enhance our cooperation on innovation. Of course, I have the very good fortune of working for someone who fully recognizes the potential for deepening our collaboration in this area. As Ambassador Berry said last month at the National Press Club, in today's market, innovation is essential for success. Investment in science, technology, and research is one of the most important guarantees we can make for our future. And I believe this is one of the fundamental areas in which we as partners and friends should look to increase our cooperation. Therefore, without further ado, I would like to invite Ambassador Berry to make his opening remarks at the inaugural Ambassadors Innovation Roundtable. Thanks very much.
Graham, thank you so much for your generosity in hosting today's event. And Professor Chubb, we are so honored to have you here to represent Australia's government as your role as chief scientist. Matt, thank you for your dedication and hard work. Niels and all of the chamber and our distinguished guests who are here, and to our amazing students who I look forward to engaging with over the course of today and this afternoon. I really look forward to our upcoming discussions. Innovation is really at the heart of what America is. In fact, from the very beginning, our country was a grand experiment. We believed then, as we do now, that freedom plus sweat equals progress, and that if you can add creativity or innovation, you get progress squared. Now, this goes way back. One of our greatest presidents, Abraham Lincoln, was not just a tremendous leader, but he was also a great innovator as well. In 1849, he was granted patent number 6,469 for a device that would lift boats that were stuck on sandbars in the Mississippi. He liked to call the U.S. patent system one of the three greatest human achievements of the day, to spur by adding, quote, the fuel of interest to the fire of genius. Now, in case if you were wondering what the other two achievements were, he thought they were writing and printing. What is certain, however, is that Lincoln was fascinated by new technology. Even before he was president, he lectured on discoveries and inventions. While he was a member of Congress, he used to take his son regularly to the patent office, and they would look at the new models of inventions that were on display. He approved and voted for the construction of the USS Monitor, the first United States armored gunboat, which ended up being very important in our later Civil War. As president, he pioneered the use of the telegraph as the BlackBerry of his day. And he daily monitored the unfolding of the Civil War by walking over to the telegraph office from the White House. Lincoln knew then what many of us know now, that innovation, invention, and creativity are necessary ingredients for success and advancement. President Obama also believes that the world is full of unprecedented perils, but also unparalleled potential. Because of this, investment in science, technology, and research is the most important guarantee the President believes that we can make for our future. We don't know where our economies will take us. We don't know where the jobs of the later 21st century will be. We don't know where the next superstorm or pandemic will hit, but we know we will be better surviving and managing all of them if we are prepared. And innovation is critical for that preparation. It will help us face the challenges of an uncertain climate, an aging population, and a changing energy landscape. Innovation can help us cure the most devastating diseases, bring life to new planets, clean water, plentiful food, and safe housing to billions of people living on this planet. And so our country is investing in basic research through the President's Strategy for American Innovation. We're promoting exports, we're encouraging entrepreneurs, and we are making historic investments in areas that we believe are critical for the future: clean energy technology, medical research, and advanced vehicle technologies. Finally, we are promoting investment in science, technology, engineering, and math, or what we call STEM education, because without the scientists and engineers for tomorrow, none of the rest is going to matter. Now, of course, Americans do not have a monopoly on good ideas or bright, talented people. Scientists and engineers in every country are revolutionizing the world in which we live. And if we want to solve the world's greatest problems, we need to look beyond our own borders and increase our cooperation. We would be hard-pressed to find better partners in that effort than our friends here in Australia. Since I've arrived here, I've gotten to go to every state and territory. And everywhere I have been amazed by Australia's dynamism. Australians, like Americans, are natural innovators, creators, builders. Excuse me. Like us, when you see a problem, you look at it as an opportunity, and you immediately start thinking about, how do I solve this? What are the solutions? Like us, Australians also have the drive, ambition, and skill to crack the nuts of those problems as you're working through them. And that's why we're here today. Our cooperation in research and development already covers universities and government, think tanks, and corporations. Australian ingenuity has helped us reach the moon. It has allowed us to drive together on Mars and has sent us to the very limits of our solar system and now beyond. It is helping Boeing build better aircraft in Melbourne, at its largest research and development hub outside of the United States. It's helping GE cut costs and improve productivity in Western Australia by streamlining their operations and improving subsea production technology, savings of 30%, a third of the cost of the previous construction. This cooperation helps both of our economies expand. It creates jobs, and it allows us to remain competitive in the world marketplace. We're also working together in medicine. A young Australian woman, Dr. Claire Smith, who is studying now at the University of Massachusetts, may have found a potential cure for malaria, which will be a life changer for millions of people on our planet. Additionally, research into brain injuries and disorders of the mind are advancing by leaps and bounds. And we are making unprecedented investments in clean energy technologies. One American company, Google, has put up $1 billion of its own money towards wind and solar projects and technology. And Australia's BlueScope Steel is developing a more cost-effective solar roof that produces both heat and electricity for homes and businesses. What all of these have in common is that we are achieving great things together through innovation. But there is so much more I believe we could do if we put our minds to it, which brings us to today. I think this is a great time to recognize Graham and the great work that is done here at Questacon, exposing children to math and science from the earliest ages. I just had guests from the United States last week from California. And it's interesting that you said that this was, the idea was launched in San Francisco. They were from San Francisco. They said, wow, I wish ours was as nice as this. So being more current, you're doing a great job. And their 4-year-old child ended up doubling the time we'd budgeted for her to be here. It's that education that you're providing is critical because, as I said, we can't solve the problems of tomorrow without engaging the students of today. And that's where each of you come into play. We need to improve our education in science, technology, engineering, and math if we're going to stand a chance. And so we are bolstering our STEM education in the United States. We will be adding 100,000 more STEM teachers across our country over the next decade. So we're making a major investment and commitment, believing that this is something that is essential for our future. We're hoping to work with Australia similarly. More teachers will help us improve science and math education for all students, especially minorities and those from lower income families. It will also allow us to draw in women and girls, which we're very glad to see so many of you here today. We can't remain competitive if we don't increase participation of all communities across the board. And so we're working with agencies like NASA and the Department of Energy to develop mentorships. We're giving students more hands-on experience, and the private sector, which is here today and we'll be hearing from, is stepping up all over the world to do the same. Getting kids involved is important for their success and their future as well. We have students here from Narrabundah, Hawker College, Gungahlin, Dixon, and ANU, and we are so pleased that each of you could join us today. Northrop Grumman has a partnership here with Dixon College, and as part of that program, you heard from Colin, students are developing an unmanned aerial vehicle that can operate in the outback, and that's going to be a challenge to see who wins that competition. It's going to also help safety for public, because you can imagine if you're hurt or unconscious in the outback, being able to be found quickly is hopefully a problem that will be solved by this challenge. Not to be outdone, Microsoft, Intel, and Google are challenging young people from all over the world to develop new and creative technologies with their global science and engineering fairs. Last year, Australian students discovered new ways to screen for anemia and manage diabetes in winning the fair. They've also are building portable water purifiers that generate electricity off of the hydrogen of the purification process. These companies are unlocking the extraordinary creative potential that exists in each of you. Of course, not all innovation cooperation needs to be serious. Some of our most widespread innovation cooperation takes place in the realm of entertainment. I think many of you here might be familiar with the Lego movie. It's awesome, and it is distributed by Warner Brothers. It has made over $500 million worldwide. The brains behind it are Sydney studio Animal Logic. Now, this studio is a prime example of the talent and creativity that is typical here in Australia. They were the first studio in Australia to make a feature-length animated film, Happy Feet. And that year, Animal Logic's Singing and Dancing's Penguins of Happy Feet beat out Cars, made by those underdog animators at Disney, for an Oscar. Not bad for a first try, huh? So whether we are making people's days a little lighter with entertainment or improving their health with medical advances, it is important to remember our greatest responsibility. If we want to give our children a better world, we must pursue the research that will make it happen. Australia and America have been partners for peace and progress for near a century. In ancient Athens, before people could vote, they had to take an oath. And it's interesting, this is going back thousands of years now, but the civic morality emphasized in this oath captures the spirit that still should motivate us today. And that oath they required to pledge that they would turn their city, Athens, just as we hope to turn Australia and America and the world, over to the next generation better, richer, and more abundant than it was given to us. That is the challenge before us. There are many, many problems in the world today, but almost all of them can be solved through cooperation and innovation. People coming together, trying to make the world richer, better, and more abundant for the next generation. Thank you all for participating in this effort today, for bringing your best to the game today, and we look forward to the results of today's discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Exciting and inspirational words, and very pleased to hear. Can we now invite Australia's Chief Scientist to share some of his wonderful experience as a distinguished academic and now someone who's trying to reform science and science policy and science procedures and the relationship between science and government in Australia. Please welcome Australia's Chief Scientist, Professor Ian Chubb.
Thank you, Graham. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, particularly the students, especially the students. I don't want to put too much weight on young shoulders, but it's obvious you are the future, and part of what we need to do today in this forum as well as in others is to make sure that the people who presently have the responsibility to set the path out for that future, set out a path that you're able and willing to walk along and to do as the Ambassador said towards the end of his talk, essentially make the world a better place for all the living things on the planet. And we will do that through you, your dedication, your education, and your commitment to not just to sit in your back room with a computer screen in front of you, but to collaborate. Well, maybe you can do that and still collaborate and cooperate with other people. But it's important, really, as the Ambassador said, that we don't imagine that we're doing this on our own, that we can solve all the global problems on our own, but we do need, indeed, to make a serious contribution to their solution, or the future won't be as rosy as we would like it to be. Ambassador, I'm going to make a few general comments, but I'd like to get my qualifiers up front, being, as Professor Durant reminded us all, somewhat experienced in this matter. I know that if I make general comments, I usually get told that I don't understand that something good is being done somewhere by somebody. Well, I do know that there are excellent examples of innovation in this country. I do know that there are excellent examples of collaboration between Australian researchers and businesses. I do know that there are excellent examples of collaboration and cooperation between Australian researchers and overseas businesses and researchers too. So a short way of saying that is that we do some things very well in this country. There's no doubt about that. And some of them, when you look at them in terms of their contribution to making the world a better place, then they're very significant, they're very important, and they are major contributors in their way and in their place to that outcome that we would all desire. So I do know that, and I don't understate the importance of those links and the outcomes that come from them. And whatever we do, we need to make sure that we create an environment within which those sorts of links and contacts can grow. What we have to do is find a way to facilitate more of them without getting in the way of the ones that are already happening and already occurring. And it's that facilitation issue which I think is a challenge for us in Australia, perhaps a little more than in the United States. I'm more recently, over the last few years, come to understand much more about how the United States goes about its science and its research. And I guess that one of the things that I grew up with was the notion that in the United States, all they do is throw seeds onto a barren field and watch the flowers grow and harvest them because they know that in amongst them all will be the ones that they want or the colours that they want. But in fact, for 40 odd years or so, the United States has been using research prioritisation to make sure that research is being done in areas where research needs to be done. And it's not just left to the fact that it can happen because it will happen because it might have once happened. It is actually organised. They have mechanisms to encourage innovation, which enabled one of my colleagues to describe the US government as the biggest venture capital funder in the world. And I think that we here need to remember that when you get governments in the way, as it were, in the right way, then the capacity to facilitate and to energise is truly, truly significant. And it doesn't always work, of course. And one of the things that I think that we need to do in Australia is to understand that sometimes things go wrong and that's not a disaster. Well, it could be a disaster, but it doesn't have to be a disaster if we analyse the risk, assess the risk, manage the risk, and work out how to make sure that we minimise the risk. And we need to do that, I think, also better than we have in the past. But my remarks today really go to the issue of the relative lack of scale that we have in Australia, and the inferential link that you can draw, if you wish, is that because of that relative lack of scale, one of the important ingredients in Australia's future scientific prosperity is going to be collaboration and cooperation, where we are contributors, not supplicants, where we bring our ideas and our talents to the table and we have something to offer that is of use and of value to those others that are sitting around or who are sitting around the table. But it is a scale. We are relatively small on a global scale. We're 27 million people. We have a relatively small scientific community. We spend about 2.2% and going down. 2.2% it used to be of our GDP on research and development. And that's, as I said, drifting downwards, but it's relatively small. But in dollar terms, it's relatively large. It's around about $8.5 billion a year. We have the disadvantage of not sitting cheek by jowl with neighbouring countries with well-embedded scientific and highly sophisticated scientific cultures, such as Canada might have, or countries in Europe might have. Our support is rationed. We could fund more than we do. It's undoubtedly true that if I were to add up what every scientist in Australia thinks we should spend, it would be 175% of GDP, and maybe we could spend that much. Whether it would be wise is another matter. So somewhere in amongst this mix of what should we spend, how much could we spend, but how do we organise what we spend so that we actually make sure that we can build the scale, we can build the capacity that we need in the country to do what we need to do, is an important issue for us. In my sort of job, it's important for our politicians, but it's critically important also for our scientific community to be engaged in that. So what my remarks are really aimed at is making sure that as we evolve our conception of how Australian science, technology, engineering and mathematics, and I'll use science and STEM almost interchangeably, but as we evolve our capacity and as we begin to think through what are the best ways for us now to manage that into the future, then we need to bear some key elements in mind. We need an alignment. We need to align our effort, or at least some proportion of our effort, to issues and align them to issues that directly reflect Australia's needs, or where we have a particular advantage to offer. And when I talk about Australia's needs, I'm not being idiosyncratically selfish about that. A lot of Australia's needs, like pandemics or variable climates, climate change, changing environment, all of those sorts of things don't sit within Australia's borders alone, but we have a particular need. The great US science magazine Science put out a paper last week showing that the impact on Australia's rainfall of global warming will be dramatic. Dramatic, shifting away from the southeast and the southwest towards the north. But this is a problem that we don't share uniquely, and that we don't have uniquely, and certainly any solution to that, any mitigation, will be because of global collaboration, because we don't cause the problem on our own. We can't solve the problem on our own, and other countries face the same dilemma anyway. So the way we've got to do that is to align it to issues that are of particular significance at this point, and be flexible enough as we do that to ensure that we can adapt to the changes as they occur and as they evolve. We need to focus a bit in this country. We don't have the budget of the United States, and certainly we don't spend on research and development as the United States does. But we're going to focus a bit to stop spreading our scarce resources too thinly. It has been the habit here for us to try to keep at least half a smile on the face of the maximum number of people because we give them a little bit of money. It's not always enough to prosecute the work properly, and we need to recognise the fact that probably right now, as of today, there are some things that are important for us, or more important for us to do on that that are aligned to our needs than some other things. And we need to build scale. We need to build the scale to support the effort, to build a scale that will make a difference when we make our contribution. And of course, we need to engage internationally. We need to earn a place at the international table where ideas and know-how are traded. We need to contribute ideas and know-how to the trade. So I'm not talking about us going there waiting outside the tent for the crumbs to spill out from the people who are in there trading. I'm talking about being inside the tent because we've got something to offer, as I said earlier. And by being inside the tent and being part of that engagement, we actually learn how to do things. We learn better ways to do things. We learn from the experiences of the United States, who have had a prioritisation process for 40-odd years. And my equivalent in the United States assures me that it has affected how their budget profile is allocated. It's not the land of the free in that sense, as we might all think. It is actually making sure in an organised way, without cutting off the idiosyncratic individuals, and we all know lots of idiosyncratic individualistic Americans, and scientists in particular, Ambassador, but they
But certainly not opinionated.
No, none of that. But we know that America has found a way to grow the individuals who have got great ideas, as well as to make sure that things are being done that need to be done, and we need to learn those ways. So why? Well, we know that our past and present economic base will change. We can't rely heavily on resources to get us through just because it used to or they used to. We have to make our way by working better and smarter. And as I said, for us that means some alignment and certainly focus and scale in our STEM, to develop and to use it as we never have before. And we know we have to collaborate, talent, skills, priorities, infrastructure, and global issues. And let me just say, parenthetically in that context, that approximately 50% of all of Australia's research publications over the last decade, and that's, well, the decade 2002 to 12, included at least one foreign author. So at least half of our research output includes at least one foreign author, and half of that, and the students will know what that means, but for the rest of you, that means a quarter of our total output is actually contributed by an Australian with an American co-author. And that's a really very significant proportion of our total output when you think about it. It's upwards of 120,000 scientific publications during that period. So the US has been a great contributor to Australian science in that way, and we have increased that engagement dramatically over the period of that decade that I just referred to. And we want to keep that happening. But then you can ask, well, why is all that important? Well, we do know, and the Ambassador mentioned this too, but we do know that science and innovation are recognised internationally as the key to boosting productivity, creating more and better jobs. Productivity just can't be about cutting wages and cutting jobs and keeping the product the same. It's actually got to be about increasing the output from more jobs and better jobs. And we've got to enhance competitiveness, and we've got to grow our economy. And science and innovation are important for that. In the US, it's been estimated that technological advances and scientific advances have produced roughly half of all US economic growth in the last 50 years. Just think about what that might mean and what it would mean for us. In Australia, 65% of economic growth per capita from 1964 to 2005 has been ascribed to improvements in our use of capital and labour, and a good deal of that has been through our STEM activities. The OECD says the same sort of thing. Increases in research and development substantially boost per capita growth. Publicly funded R&D has a high rate of return, as well as directly driving economic productivity growth. And one of the important things that the US has adopted and embraced very significantly, not necessarily to the letter all the time, but very significantly, was an open letter in the late 1990s that a group of American corporate leaders wrote to the then President Clinton, reminding him that it was his job to put in what they called the patient capital, the capital that is actually investing in the ideas that are not necessarily going to go to the bottom line tomorrow, but will eventually create an environment within which the environment that they described was one in which they could go and be creative in risk-taking. The ideas were flowing, the environment was right, government put in the patient capital, they came along and invested in that climate, in creative risk-taking, in order to turn innovation into product and market and boost an economy. So I think it's critically important for us that we recognise two things out of all this, that innovation is important, that the collaborations with the US are important as an important part of our existing activity that we can grow and develop further, and that as the Ambassador said, underpinning all that is that our education system. We would not have in this country a research system if we didn't have an education system. And it's that education, and science education in particular, that we need to encourage and develop in this country and provide the best possible education that we possibly can for the young people who are coming along and walking along the path that we're trying to set out for them. And I say that because part of education is to increase and develop curiosity. And when you think about why we are standing here today and why we didn't become extinct 20 or 30,000 years ago, then there is a solid body of evidence that suggests that it's partly because Homo sapiens was developing at that period a creative brain that enabled us to adapt to the changes that were occurring around us. Other species became extinct. We didn't. We survived. And I think that one of the things that we need to understand is that we've, from that period forward at least, we've never not been curious. We've never been satisfied with the status quo. We've always wanted to understand more. We've always wanted to understand what the planets were like. We've always wanted to understand what it would be like to travel to the moon. We're now speculating what it would be like to travel to distant planets or more distant Mars and beyond. All of those things are because human beings have an imagination which can be used to make the world that better place. So creativity has been linked to survival, and I think I could probably put it to you and make a case to say that if we now don't think creatively, if we don't think in terms of innovation, if we don't think of better ways to do things by using our talents, skills and essentially our instincts to always want to know more, then some of the challenges that confront this planet will become insurmountable. So the choice is ours. Do we encourage curiosity? Do we encourage creativity? Do we encourage innovation? Do we encourage collaboration and working together, because not all the best minds live in Australia either, Ambassador. We just need to bring the best minds of the world together in constructive ways where we can facilitate the exchange of ideas and the development of processes and products that will indeed make the world a much better place for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ambassador Berry, Chief Scientist Chubb, for those remarks. Much appreciated. What we'd like to now do is just a very brief set change here. As gentlemen, you can slide over there to the seats in front, and we'll call down our first panel, which will be moderated by Niels Marquardt from the American Chamber of Commerce. And we'll include Maureen Dougherty from Boeing, Kirby Anderson from GE, Christian Bennett from BHP Billiton, Glenn Frankish from Lockheed Martin, and Terry Stevenson from Raytheon, who will talk about U.S.-Australia innovation success stories. Please, go ahead. Who will talk about U.S.-Australia innovation success stories from the business perspective. And with that, I'll turn it over to our panel.
Thank you very much, Matt. And let me just say on behalf of the American Chamber of Commerce, we're delighted to be here in support of Ambassador Berry's excellent initiative in making innovation an important part of his agenda and the agenda of the United States and Australia going forward. I'm very pleased to be here to moderate this panel of 5 iconic American and Australian companies to tease out their success stories for all of you. We only have 45 minutes. I'm going to be brutal in managing the time. I'm going to ask each of the 5 presenters to present as succinctly as possible their success story anecdotes, and then at the end I hope that we'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A, very much involving you, whether you do it through Twitter or in the traditional way. So without further ado, let me start with Maureen Dougherty, the president of Boeing Australia and South Pacific, and in full disclosure, the president of the American Chamber of Commerce, my boss. So, Maureen Dougherty.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Ambassador and Professor Chubb, and obviously this Questacon is amazing. This is where the interest gets sparked, right? It really does, and I speak from personal experience in that regard. You know, I'd like to start really big picture. You know, the Boeing company will celebrate its 100-year anniversary in 2016. And it's a history really created from aviation and aerospace innovation. And that's what we do. And as we're reflecting on that, as employees, we're very proud of that legacy, right? And as I looked into it, we have actually been in collaboration with Australia for 87 of those years. When you include our commercial aviation, our defense and military-related work, our collaboration with Australian universities and government research organizations, our global supply chain, pretty much there's an Australian company as part of every commercial airplane that we build. And then if you look right now, we have over 3,000 Australian employees working on research, advanced manufacturing, as the ambassador mentioned, and also design, development, and production of military systems for the Australian government and allies. And when I think about it, and you talk about anecdotes, there's probably so many that I could talk about. One of our great collaborations is with CSIRO. And over the course of history, I think we've been collaborating with them for 25 years. Several hundred projects. At any given time, we have 12 to 15 projects pretty much in work, ranging from unmanned systems to aviation, health management and diagnostics, to biofuels. It could go on and on. And then in Melbourne, we have been working on a resin and fusion composites. And in that respect, that is an area of innovation that was developed here in Australia, proven out over time, small scale, incrementally to large scale, and then now it is the only place in the world where we do these composite parts, movable trailing edge parts, for the latest Boeing airplane, the 787 Dreamliner. And that will continue. And it's innovation that underpins all of that. So when I look out at this audience and I think about the second century of the Boeing company, I'm absolutely confident that some of you, and you're other school colleagues across Australia, will be the leaders of not only Boeing's operation in Australia, but what we do around the world. Because the world is getting smaller and smaller and more collaborative, and that's exactly what we need to get the power of the minds engaged in the challenges that the ambassador and professor described. So I think as an opening, I just want you to know I'm counting on you for the second century of the Boeing company, because it's going to be as great as the first, I'm confident.
Thank you very much, Maureen, for setting such a great example of succinct presentation. I think we're going to manage our time well. I'd like to turn now to Dr. Terry Stevenson, the Chief Technology Officer of another iconic American company, big in Australia, Raytheon. Dr. Stevenson.
Thanks very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much. And I notice you're wearing your R&M William boots, so that's a good indication you've become Australian. I'll pick an example. If you want to innovate, you've got to create the environment. If you're standing over people, stressing them in high-pressure environments, some people will say sometimes necessity is the mother invention, but 99 times out of 10 it's not. You actually have to encourage and know that that's a goal, and you have a relaxed and interactive environment. Collaboration is key. I'll take an example because it involves government and industry as well, is that the ARC Council sets up research grants. A few years ago we took advantage of this. We collaborated with University of Massachusetts in Boston. They actually had an application of a very smart radar system to give early warning on typhoons. So we actually worked with them and brought that out to Australia. Under the grant, we worked with the University of Adelaide, we worked with the University of Melbourne. Each of these groups had something to offer, and we worked with DSTO. And we actually networked this system to actually use it for bushfire tracking. And you wonder, well, Raytheon Australia, Raytheon, what are they doing in bushfire tracking? And the answer is, trust me, there are military applications. But we were able to go out into the field with this system that had all this collaboration with all these various stakeholders, and actually very quickly track bushfires and movements. And what you find when you get bushfires, there's very small dust particles and insects and swarming, which you actually can use to track. And if you can track them, you know the direction of the bushfire. And given Australia's sort of environment, we're always going to have bushfires. And so very, very quickly, and the other thing I'll say about the government research grants is a multiplier effect. So you put in money and contributions in kind. The government, if they recognise that the idea you have is relevant to their industry and Australia, then they'll multiply that, and it's very productive. At the end of the day, things like intellectual property are shared, and it's shared across the world. So we have a collaborator, university in the US, 2 universities in Australia, Raytheon Australia, notionally a defence company, and DSTO, which obviously is a defence research organisation. All of us have taken something from this innovation based on the collaboration and are using in our own industries. But the point is we actually all came together to give an application that was good for society as well. So I've got plenty more, but I don't want to space. But the thing is, just quickly, some of the other things that's happening in Australia, there's a defence group called RPD&E, which is a rapid prototyping, developing and evaluation group, brings all of industry together. The government has ideas they want solved. This group acts as a filter of those ideas to say, because one of the hardest things to do when you're working with people is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? This group was set up because mainly when they came to us with a problem, you go back and say, that's not really the problem you're trying to solve, this is what it is. And so when you start that sort of what we call a systems process, the first thing you've got to do is get it right. Now, notwithstanding that, serendipity is live, and most things come out of while you're doing other things, certainly in my case. By the way, when I'm at work, I think I'm creative, but it's when I'm home doing something else that the ideas actually get formulated.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. Our next presenter represents the largest mining company in the world, I think Australia's largest company, and I believe the largest foreign investor in the technology revolution in the United States around shale oil and gas. So we look forward to hearing what Christian Bennett, the Vice President of BH Billiton, has to say.
Well, thank you very much, Niels, and to Ambassador Berry, thank you for this opportunity. And think about your remark to the press club that innovation is the key to success. It couldn't be more spot on. And just listening to the comments this morning, I was just thinking, I was in Port Hedland Harbour yesterday off the coast of Western Australia, and our first shipment to China was in 1891. It was 50 tonnes of lead. And I remember watching the China Glory sail past yesterday with 220,000 tonnes of iron ore on it. And it was one of 7 ships that were going to do that yesterday. And there's a lot of innovation that's gone into that, and that innovation is really absolutely central to our safe work environment, which is an absolute key paramount issue for us. It's central to the ability to identify and develop new resources that to meet the growing energy demands and resource commodity requirements of the globe, and to do that with the largest possible footprint, and to do it in the most sustainable fashion. And then, of course, innovation is key to ensure that we as a company can sustain what's been a very long history into the future by being internationally competitive and being able to sustain the long-term employment and other opportunities here in Australia and elsewhere, and particularly now we're a very large investor in the United States. And we are working with so many US companies around the world to try and make sure that we can sustain that reputation for being what we'd like to think the most reliable, low-cost, high-quality supplier of resources and energy that the planet can offer. And we also, in some respects, today to debunk a bit of a myth that mining is just about digging it up, putting it in the back of a truck, putting it in a train, putting it in a ship, and waiting for the check to arrive. Well, hopefully it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more complex. If only it were so easy. And I think of some of the things our Houston-based petroleum team does, and we are now the largest foreign investor in the US shale business. And it has been an absolutely game-changing dynamic that's taken place in the US energy system and with respect to shale, and in part by virtue of the innovation that's been shown around directional drilling. So we can now, and we work very closely with the US, we've got a great US partner out in Houston, where we can now sort of drill vertically 4 kilometres, and we can just turn the drill bit 90 degrees and go head 2 kilometres the other direction. It's kind of like if you're a Parliament House, it'd be like sort of drilling down the distance to the parade ground at Duntroon, and then just sort of taking a right-hand turn and heading towards the outskirts of Fishwick. And then we've got, and then offshore we've just finished working with another American company, a new offshore drilling vessel, Invictus, which can drill 12 kilometres, and it can do that actually in depths of water up to 3.5 kilometres. That's Transocean is our partner there. So these are complex, difficult engineering, scientific challenges that we're trying to master to make sure that we can continue to develop the resources that the world is looking for. And we're doing lots of different other things about how to reduce dust particles from the atmosphere, which is all about making sure that we can create the best sort of work environment for our people. But I actually wanted to focus on one sort of slightly more sort of specific issue that you might be familiar with, and that's our big Caterpillar trucks. Of course, Caterpillar being a great American company, and we use their fleet of 793F trucks throughout our iron ore operations in Western Australia. And these look, I was in one of these things 2 days ago. These are it's unusual to have 220 tonnes of rock sitting behind you and in a vehicle that can also hit a top speed of 70 kilometres per hour. I'm glad to say we definitely don't drive those trucks at 70 kilometres per hour. But these are really very significant pieces of equipment. And we've just started, well, in the last year, we have 6 of these trucks running autonomously at our newest mine in the Pilbara, Jimblebar. And by autonomous, obviously, meaning without a driver. And we'll soon expand that to a second circuit at Jimblebar, and we'll soon add another 6 793Fs to the neighbouring mines near Jimblebar. Now, why do we do that? And this is where innovation is particularly important for driving our safety culture. If you can reduce the number of people who are having to operate heavy machinery in hazardous environment, then that's a good thing for, in terms of the safety and the footprint with which we can extract resources. We're moving those jobs into high-tech, in control rooms to make sure that the operations are overseen. That's a safer, it's a smarter work environment. It's also very important to helping drive our productivity and our competitiveness agenda. It's reducing the day-to-day variability in what those trucks can, how much tonnage they can haul. So if we can actually reduce the number of troughs and therefore raise the average of the performance of that fleet over the course of a year, then we can get closer towards the maximum sort of haulage of 8,760 hours of sort of truck availability per year. And that's all about improving our competitiveness. That, so not only does that deliver a safer working environment, it also makes for a more productive, it makes for a more profitable operation. That's a good thing for our owners of the company. That includes 7.6 million sort of Australian superannuation accounts. It's good for the Treasury just next door. They've never said no to more tax, and I don't think they will in the future. So, this innovation, we're working with our American, companies like Caterpillar, like Transocean, is really essential. That collaboration is essential to our success, and very much the legacy we want to hand over to the next generation of management as they develop these ore bodies over the next 50, 100 plus years.
Thank you very much, Christian. You've given us a lot of food for thought. I'd like to turn now to Glenn Frankish, the technology manager of Lockheed Martin. I believe, if I can say this, you're coming off a great week, and you just had in the last few days the rollout of the Joint Strike Fighter in Fort Worth.
That's correct, and the first one's off the line now, and still got a little way to go before somebody sits in it and flies it, but that's all part of the long process of building a JSF. And it's a really good example as well of the sorts of things that Australia is participating in quite strongly at the moment. And so the JSF with its tails being built down in Melbourne, many of the tools that used to put the engines in place are also built in Australia, and the innovation there sort of extends all the way down the line of Lockheed Martin's construction facility, and that's 1.6 kilometres long. So there's many, many opportunities that are available for the innovation that we see locally in advanced manufacturing in particular to take place over the next 30 years of that program as well, because it will keep evolving as well. Maybe if I just talk a little bit about Lockheed Martin, what we're doing here in Australia in innovation. I think our chief scientist for our corporation is Dr. Ned Allen. And Dr. Ned Allen is very big on being the first customer for innovation. That's his whole philosophy about how he structures his innovation. And to do that, he's a very flexible, he encouraged our organisation to take a very flexible and collaborative approach to how we work with our partners down the line. And that can be, working in collaborative research centres, which is one of the things that we've started up recently in Australia. So we've joined the Space Environment Management CRC, and that's going to bring a whole group, if you like, of Lockheed Martin researchers down to ANU to work over the next 5 years on projects to do with, that are related to our programs like Space Fence and Earth Management. So it's a great example of, one of the, focused, I would call it, initiatives of government that's allowed us to do a bit more work in the near future here. We also do a lot of work in Australia around innovation about STEM. We're really ramping that up at the moment. It's one of the focuses of our CEO. And literally next month we're going to have Rick Heave, who is a space shuttle astronaut down here, talking to a group of people pretty similar to the group I think I'm looking at right now, to explain what it is to go to space and why it is important that we go to space and why it is important that we keep finding new things to do in space, like go to Mars. And that's, Rick is actually a employee of Lockheed Martin, and he runs the Antarctic program down in Antarctica for us. So, there are some parallels, I would imagine, between Antarctica and living and working down there and going up to, space as well. And they're the sorts of things that we're doing on a corporate scale, and right down to engineers in the classroom programs. Over in Adelaide in particular is a very strong program that we're doing over there as well. On that first customer sort of initiative, it's our supply chain is working very hard. I think about $350 million worth of work eventually will go into the JSF from Australia. I'd like to see that come up a little bit more. So we're still looking, we're still out there looking for people to work with. And we know that if those companies come to us and they're not quite ready, or if it's not quite right, we will work with them to make sure that they have the best opportunity to join that program there. So we're really focused on our mission system, or our mission for our, the company is to have complex challenges, scientific discovery, and innovative solutions. And that's right from the top. So, that's the way that we're looking at the whole innovation process. We know it's going to be a long process, and very happy to keep working to try and be that first customer. And that is honestly one of the best ways to ensure that innovation keeps going if we keep buying stuff. So it's very important to us.
Thanks a lot, Glenn, and congratulations again on the JSF. Our last speaker before we go into Q&A, and I hope you're thinking about your questions already, is from one of America's most well-known and diversified companies. You find them in your kitchen, but you find them pretty much in every sector of the economy. Kirby Anderson, Director of Government Relations for General Electric. Kirby?
No, thanks very much, and thank you, Ambassador, for this initiative. It's great to be on stage with so many great companies. GE, through our founder, Thomas Edison, innovation's in our DNA. I think we can claim that. It's interesting, the year that GE joined the Dow Jones Industrial Index, 1896, was the year we did our first project here in Australia, which was to literally replace horsepower in Brisbane trams. The trams didn't survive, but we're obviously here, strong and still on the Dow Jones. Today we employ 5,000 employees in Australia. Across all of our businesses operate here, from capital, oil and gas, power and water, energy management, healthcare, aviation, transportation, and a new mining venture which is actually being led out of Australia. The Ambassador mentioned oil and gas. If you think about oil and gas for us, in 2010 we had 64 employees in oil and gas in Australia. Today we have 600, and that will steadily climb as those LNG projects go into the operation and maintenance phase. And for us, approach to oil and gas is that we are actually established a large centre, which I know the Ambassador visited weeks after his appointment, to do the services and maintenance, but importantly to develop the skills. So we have a dedicated skills development centre there at Jandakot near Perth to do that. It's great to be in this forum, and particularly with Professor Chubb and your leadership on STEM, because that is an issue very much in GE's mind, and to have so many students here is great. So I've got an advertisement for those students, particularly those at university. This morning we started to advertise for our up to 25 12-week summer internships with General Electric. They are paid internships. So if you can look on gecareers.com, go to Australia and type in internship, I really commend that to you. I mean, these internships will be offered across our oil and gas, our capital, and our global growth organisation. So through the Christmas period. So just when you thought you might be spending time watching the cricket, you can come and join GE. So I'd certainly commend that to you.
Thanks very much, Kirby. We'll now move into our Q&A. We've got about 20 minutes. Let me ask the first question, and then I'll turn to the audience. I think, Professor Chubb, you talked about governments being in the right way. If I could ask our panelists, maybe starting with Maureen, who has your largest overseas footprint here in Australia, what it is that you look for in foreign environments when you allocate your R&D or innovation dollar around the world.
Well, I mean, first and foremost is the things you described. I mean, there's an educated workforce. There's a mindset of curiosity, innovation, can do, will do, done kind of attitude. We look for, obviously, close understanding and relations with customers so that we really understand their needs and that it isn't a domain that we can bring some, experience to bear. So there is that prioritizing, right? We don't just go out and try to do everything. We try to focus, obviously, in the aviation and aerospace area. We look for, obviously, a government that is focused on allowing business to do what it does best, which is, again, to focus its resources and its investments, and a good collaboration of what's important to that country. So, again, you're always trying to make the match. What's important to that customer? What's important to that government? What's important to that, airline? And see where you can have that kind of overlap and collaboration. And then a free flow of dialogue and information so that you don't get bound up in either bureaucracy on the government side or bureaucracy on the company side, right? Because we all live by the laws of our land, of where we're incorporated. So again, a lot of it is being open, sharing. And of course, Australia is a country that is open, is transparent, which goes a long way when we try to choose a country to get involved in.
Thanks very much, Maureen. I think I saw the first hand right up here in the 5th row. I don't know if we have a, yeah, here's a microphone for you. Let's see.
Hello. Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I'm 17 years old, and I go to Hawker College. Can you hear me?
Vanessa.
Yeah. So this conference is all about innovation and the world we will pass on to future generations. So my question is for Christian Bennett. So your company mines coal and petroleum, energy from the Industrial Revolution, which is essentially not innovative and actively endangers our future through accelerating climate change. So how will you, as BH Billiton, protect our future and transition away from dirty fossil fuels in order to not contribute to damaging the long-term habitability of our planet for all species?
Christian?
Well, look, it's a good. Look, I totally understand the purpose behind your question, and I think, look, we take climate change extremely seriously. We accept the IPCC. We think the world needs to find sensible, pragmatic ways to deliver the energy that the world demands, and to help lift what is still 1.3 billion people that don't have reliable access to electricity, energy today. How do you find ways to deliver those outcomes so that we all have access to affordable energy and not just developed economies? To do that through a sensible manner and in a way which also addresses the climate challenge is essential, and that's why we've invested a lot of time and a lot of money around technological solutions that can help to drive down both the carbon emissions of ourselves, and then also, as we look forward, I mean, obviously technologies around, for example, CCS, obviously, and the broader energy mix balance with the role of renewables is going to play a critical part in getting the world to a point where it can deliver the sustainable energy, the affordable, reliable energy that people need, and to do it in a sustainable fashion. You know, what's happened in China over the last 15, 20 years is extraordinary. 600 million people alone have been lifted out of poverty. They've been lifted out of poverty by having access to the reliable resources in many respects from countries like Australia, to be able to build the buildings, to help, you know, people get education. And when you start getting more educated communities, you start to see more control around sort of birth rates and population growth. It all starts to lead to more sustainable outcomes for the planet in the long run. But look, there are clearly, you know, significant challenges ahead. We are very conscious of those. We, as I say, we accept the science, and we're trying to find ways to make sure that we do what our customers ask of us and what we can deliver in the most sustainable fashion possible with the lightest footprint.
Thank you very much, Christian. Who would like to ask the next question? Right here. And then you.
Hi, I'm Laurel. I'm from Narrabundah College. And along the same sort of lines of that question, particularly to the oil and gas companies here, do you think that it is realistically possible to be able to balance like your environmental footprint and sustainability with the profits and productivity that we are seeing from like your companies today?
Well, we certainly, I mean, one of the core fundamentals we have, the values of our company, and one of the very first ones is to make sure that we do what we do in the most sustainable possible fashion, and that's why we are innovating right down to things like, for example, the amount of dust particles that are released when, for example, we use technology to help stimulate the gas reservoirs in the shale industry in the United States. Everything we do is designed to A, make sure that our workforce is safe, and B, also is to make sure that we do that in the most sustainable fashion. There was still, the OECD, the International Energy Agency, all forecast very substantial increases in demand for energy as the world goes forward, particularly out to sort of 2030. And that's, we have 1.3 billion people who are still waiting to get affordable or even access to electricity. And you sort of see the photos of Bill Gates' tweets about, with kids studying under a street light. These are the things that, that perhaps we don't see every day here in Australia, but there's still a very insatiable appetite for energy around the world. It needs to be met, and we need to do it in a way that addresses the climate change challenge, and that's what we're very committed to being a part of.
Let me ask GE to say a few words about this challenge as well.
No, it's a good question. And I mean, we see like coal seam gas, for example, in Queensland. We are involved in that project from wellhead to the compression trains. But one of the, quite serious issues raised is about the water that comes with CSG production. So we actually treat that water. So we have provided water treatment technology. And once that water is treated, it's actually being aggregated and then being provided to local irrigators on the Darling Downs for their cropping. So, it's in our interest. As I said, we've been here 118 years. We want to be here for the next 118 years and more. And so, we want to work with our partners and customers to ensure their products and projects are sustainable. So,
if I'm not mistaken, this is a perfect example of a challenge. You didn't have the solution to it when you started on the project, and you ended up with one that was a win-win for agriculture.
And there was, in the early days of CSG production, there was a thought of, we could re-inject the water, or we could put it back into ephemeral streams, which would damage the environment. But the government and successive governments in Queensland have said, well, is there a beneficial use for this water? And so by having that water treated, available to those irrigators, there's a virtual recharge because they're not drawing on the groundwater that they'd usually use for their crops. So yeah, exactly. And the example in Queensland is being looked at overseas in how they are also developing their unconventional gas resources.
Thanks, Kirby. You had a question here, and then I'll move to you.
Hi, my name is Blasis from Narrabundah, and I'd like to address this question to Maureen. Exactly a year ago, in July 2013, Asian Airline 214 made a crash landing at San Francisco Airport, and exactly a year later, and very recently, MH17, which was also a plane from Boeing 777, was shot down by a missile. And I was just wondering, maybe not necessarily as a business, but as a human being acting on the death of another, is there any update planned on the newly announced Boeing 777X plane?
Okay, so first of all, obviously from a Boeing perspective, or even a human, as an aviation leader and as a human, our thoughts and deepest sympathies obviously go to the families and those friends of the people that perished in these accidents. I mean, no question. I could even stop there. Obviously in aviation, and that's the good thing about aviation, is we're constantly learning. We're constantly learning, and it's a very close community. Even though we may be competitors in some respects, or collaborators or suppliers at one point, there is a lot of focus on continuous improvement. So whenever there is an accident of any kind, or a development in testing, as we develop these complex systems, we do share as a community, and obviously we have regulatory bodies that also help do the sharing when things are proprietary to ensure that we all learn lessons and continue to improve our airplanes. When you look at the safety record of the aviation industry, it's really outstanding, overall. It's amazing. But that obviously doesn't take away, the importance of when there are these incidents for whatever reason, that we continue to learn from every single one, and we do.
Thank you, Maureen. We had a question right here, and then move up to the top here.
Hi, my name's Cal. I'm from Gungahlin College. My question is to both Glenn and to Maureen. So you work with aviation industries, and aviation industries produce aircraft which guzzle jet fuel, which is quite a significant contributor to pollution. But obviously aviation is something that's important for global connections and stuff. So balancing that with concerns about things like global warming, what steps are your companies making to make aviation a more eco-friendly and sustainable business?
Glenn, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So you're quite right. The jet fuel is it's an interesting smell when you go to the airport, and it's obviously not conducive to good thoughts. But you need it. We need to get from city to city, and we need transportation, and this is the best solution available at the moment. Okay? In the future, I think we're going to see electric planes that can do this. There is absolutely no reason why we can't aim for and go for it and try to build an electric plane that is a commercial airliner, and probably more in Maureen's area than ours, and also using electric vehicles, and gives us a flexibility about where we draw the power from. We don't have that flexibility at the moment, so there's some innovation that has to occur in that area. With respect to other methods, there's biofuels, okay, and they are being actively researched. I think we do that in collaboration, and forgive me, I'm relatively new to my job, so I don't know everything about this, but I do know that biofuels are another option that is being quite rigorously explored, and I think there are issues with freezing of the fuel, etc., at when it's operating at high altitudes, but we're working on that now.
Thank you. Maureen?
Yeah, I'll just reinforce that. So obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but each airplane we build is more and more fuel efficient. So there's a lot of focus on fuel efficiency, and Boeing's taking the tact of point to point, as opposed to bringing airplanes to a hub. It's just a model we chose based on customer feedback and fuel efficiency. In parallel, though, we have a lot of work that we do in collaboration with research organizations, both in the US and Australia, on biofuels. We work closely with our airlines. In Australia, we work closely with Qantas and Virgin Australia, focused on what else we can do with regards to advancing the biofuels. And it's really the infrastructure for biofuels. The airplane can run on biofuels. We've demonstrated that. Well, of course, and Kirby, with your engines too. We've demonstrated that already on commercial airplanes. We've demonstrated that on the F-18 called the Green Hornet. So there's been demonstrations. The question is, how do we make that industry viable? Taking the biomasses, getting enough infrastructure built, and to supply enough biofuel for the, all the users of biofuel. And obviously, so that's not something Boeing would do directly, but we're supportive of that kind of research, and we've done that collaboratively with the government here in Australia.
Thank you. I think we have time for 2 more questions. You're the next one, and then all the way on the top for the last question, please.
Good morning, David Wilson from the Department of Industry. Question to Glenn in regard to your topic about the first customer.
Yep.
I guess I'm interested in the theme of the partnerships, and for, I suppose, SME, small Australian companies, beyond their idea, what other advice would you have for them regarding how do they, what are you looking for them to work with you as you search out that type of, along your concept of your first customer and that next idea and the next innovation?
I think when you look at the first customer could be 30 years away before their product comes to line. And in that case, you're really looking at the university system and working with the university system on topics that are of relevance. And I mean, we mentioned coal and all of those sorts of industries there. We look at it a little bit differently. We would say, well, coal has an energy density of, it's not very high, and nuclear power has an energy density that's extremely high. And somewhere in between there is the renewable energies, but there's actually quite a lot of gaps in there, for example, where we think that there are going to be places in the future that new energy technologies will be available. And so if we're looking at that 30-year period, we're willing to go and sponsor some very fundamental research to get that achieved. And we're actually doing that in Australia now. And we're doing it through the ARC. So that's a good example of a bit of a quick success. When it comes to companies who might have some product ready to go, okay, we would encourage them to approach the global supply chain people that we have here. The global supply chain don't only buy things, they will also take innovation to the customers in the US. So, we have skunk works, for example, and we have items from Australia that are coming through our global supply chain to be evaluated by skunk works. Now, first time round, they may not align with the program that we have, but we'll give them the feedback, and if there is a really genuine need that we think that we can apply this to, then we can sponsor some of the improvements that we want to see to that product. We're not ungenerous. You know, we understand that those improvements will dissipate into their other products and, you know, service other customers as well. But if they meet our needs, that's what we needed to do. So there are a couple of different mechanisms there, and there's no fixed innovation formula. You know, we can't give you that. We can only give you the principles of, you know, which is what we're trying to do with the first customer approach.
Thanks, Glenn. Yes, you'd like
just
to Gary?
on that, just like with Lockheed Martin, I think Australia as well, is we're constantly out there looking at SMEs and evaluating their capabilities, not just for us locally, but into the global supply chain. And so a lot of these companies, you know, they sell product into our parent companies, and we support them in actually maturing their processes so that they can be part of that supply chain. So that's going on very, very extensively.
Thanks very much. One last question. We have just a little time, please, on the top row.
Hi, everybody. Bit of a tough crowd this morning. Good to see the Australian spirit still alive and well. My name's Richard Horton. I'm a venture capital lawyer. I spent 13 years in Silicon Valley. In the last 3 years, I've been working half my time in Sydney, half in Silicon Valley. And I work with a lot of Australian startup companies, and most of them really want to go, you know, straight to the United States. Many of us are keen to keep the companies and keep innovation in Australia, but there still seems to be a lot that just want to go out to the US. And I see that most of the panellists work for what were originally, I guess, US companies. And I think my question to you is, for the students in the room and for the young entrepreneurs in Australia more generally, if they were to ask you whether they should stay in Australia at the beginning of their career or jump on a plane and go to California or somewhere else in the US, would you have any clear advice for them? Do you have any particular thoughts on that?
Thanks, Richard. Which Australian would like to answer that question? Terry, you can start.
I'm on the NICTA Business Evaluation Council, and we look at, we actually fund through the government companies, small startup companies all the time. And basically, you know, after about 3 years, they're matured and they're spun out. Where they end up is probably some of them are in the US, but they start in Australia. So what you'll find is the environment here is more conducive on a smaller scale to get innovation going and get to a level where it can be commercialised. The next step is usually offshore to actually, you know, make some money. But the starting point is here, and I'd encourage you to stay here initially, find one of these innovative like companies, and then when it's spun out and goes overseas, that's where you go with it as well. But most of these people then come back, and so we've got operations in the US and Australia drawing on this. The climate here is much better, but it's a bigger pond over the US.
I think that's the key, to get people to come back, because the industry will grow here, there'll be more venture capital, and it'll be a much, you know, there'll be more money here to keep people here from the beginning, I think.
There is money here if you know where to look for it.
Fair enough.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
see
you.
Matt at the podium. I think that's a signal, but I'd like to thank our panelists.
Before we do that, we do have one last question. We did have several questions come through Twitter, so thanks very much. Many of the questions have already been covered, but one I thought was very good from Douglas Robertson, who's the head of research at ANU, who's here, and he was keying off of the chief scientist remarks, and basically, chief scientist mentioned the importance of patient capital, and I think maybe a good way to end up this panel is Mr. Robertson is asking, from a business perspective, when we talk about patient capital and you're looking ahead into the future, how long are we talking, and what are your time horizons like from the business perspective?
Yeah.
Throw that up.
I guess I can jump in. We have different levels of research that go on in our corporation. So we have a thing called PhantomWorks that looks out more 20 years and beyond. And they're the organization that spends most of their time working with universities, working with think tanks, working with other leaders in the aviation community to say where, and with our customers to see where we would be in 20 years. That capital we're a lot more patient with, right? Because that's the whole point. The whole point is not to be burdened down with the immediate needs of the business. So look out into the future. Then we have, and that's done both in Boeing Research and Technology, which, by the way, is the largest footprint outside the United States is here in Australia. Actually, Dr. Armstrong will be talking to you later on our work there. But, and then we have, and so they look out in the future, and then we have more 5-year horizons. And what we're looking there, and each of the businesses have a what I'd call a research type arm. And their focus is on how do we take some of the nearer term things that could be developed or innovated or incrementally innovated along the path and turn those into a product. And so that would be, obviously more pressure on that organization to deliver quicker.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and please join me in thanking our panel, first panel this morning.
Well done.